In this video, we will re-terminate the lateral push camera cable on a ProTrack transporter. Re-termination is necessary when the camera cable is damaged from a cut or sharp bend, causing a kink in the line. To begin the repair, gather the following tools: a pair of pliers, flathead screwdriver, wire cutters, wire strippers, utility knife, pipe cutter, hacksaw, measuring tape and marker, heat gun, soldering iron and solder, and alcohol and a clean cloth. There are 2 re-termination kits available for this repair, number 841-38183 and number 841-38183-1. Both kits are identical except that the -1 kit comes with an epoxy dispenser gun. If you don't use the -1 kit, you must supply your own epoxy and applicator in order to successfully re-terminate the cable. Before working on the cable, turn off the power to the camera and to the mainline controller unit. Identify the break in the line and use a rotary tool or metal saw to cut the cable at least 3 inches from the break. Measure and mark 2 inches from the end of the fresh cut. Use a pipe cutter to cut through the protective outer jacket at the 2-inch mark, being careful not to cut the inner braid of the cable. Heat up the end of the cable with a heat gun to facilitate the removal of the jacket. Use a box cutter or other sharp blade to score the cable jacket from the end of the cable to the cut on opposite sides, then remove the protective cable jacket. The protective jacket is quite stiff, and you might need to use a small screwdriver to loosen the jacket to make it easier to remove. After removing the jacket, use a small screwdriver or dental tool to fray the inner braid from around the inner cable and pull it back towards the cable. Gather the braid together at the fresh jacket cut and twist together tightly, being careful not to break the strands. Measure and mark the inner cable a 1/2 inch from the cut protective outer jacket and twisted braid. Use a hacksaw to score the circumference of the inner cable jacket at the 1/2 inch mark. Be careful not to cut into the wire. Use a pair of pliers, or if you have them, nipper pliers, to crush the fiberglass inner jacket outside of the scored line and remove it from the inner wire. Twist the inner wire. Cut the inner wire a 1/4 inch from the end of the fiberglass inner jacket, and cut the twisted braid wire at a 1/4 inch from the end of the fiberglass inner jacket. Take the pigtail that is included with the kit and trim the white and blue wires 1 inch from the end of the pigtail's yellow jacket. Use a wire stripper to remove a 1/4 inch of the jacket from the end of the white and blue wires and twist the stripped ends together. Now cut the brown and black wires at a 1/2 inch from the pigtail's yellow jacket. Using the wire stripper, remove a 1/4 inch of the jacket from the end of the brown and black wires. Then twist the brown and black stripped ends together. Use a box knife to cut off the white identification label from the pigtail, but be careful not to cut into the pigtail. Take the base coupler from the kit and thread the end of the pigtail with the bare wires into the flat side of the base coupler. Slide the base coupler to the end of the pigtail. The cone-shaped end of the coupler should be facing away from the pigtail's connector end. Cut a piece of shrink tubing to fit over the exposed piece of the inner wire and slide into place over the inner sleeve on the cable. Solder the twisted brown and black wires on the pigtail to the inner wire on the camera cable. Slide the shrink tubing over the soldered connection and use a heat gun to seal it. Solder the twisted blue and white wires on the pigtail to the twisted braid on the cable. Use alcohol and a clean shop towel or paper towel to wipe the end of the outer jacket on the cut cable and the exposed fiberglass inner jacket. Take the small threaded post, part number 304-20100, and screw it into the flat end of the base coupler till it is firmly hand-tight. Slide the base coupler down the pigtail over the soldered connections and thread it into the end of the camera cable. Use the included zip tie to snug the pigtail against the threaded post on the base coupler to secure it. Depending on which kit that you have, you should now assemble the included epoxy gun or ready your own epoxy applicator. Fill the inside of the base coupler with epoxy to encapsulate the pigtail and soldered connections. Avoid getting epoxy on the outside of the base coupler and thoroughly clean off any that spills out of the inside of the coupler or drips onto the outside surface. Place the cable in a vise so that the base coupler remains upright as it cures to avoid spilling the epoxy. Tighten the vise snug enough to hold, but be careful not to damage the cable. Allow the epoxy to adequately cure before continuing with the repair. For the next part of the assembly, it is useful to keep the cable in the vise, but be careful not to bend or crush the camera cable. Slide the spring over the pigtail and seat it over the end of the base coupler. Using a flat-bladed screwdriver, expand the spring coils to find the slot in the coupler and install one of the C-clip retaining rings in the gap. You might need to use pliers to seat the C-clip retaining ring and lock the spring to the coupler. Now take the camera connector, part number 806-38351, and screw it into the connector at the end of the pigtail. Overlap the pigtail cable so that it forms an S and insert it into the spring. Then push the camera connector into the spring to seat it. With the camera connector fully seated, use a flat blade screwdriver to separate the spring coils to reveal the camera connector groove. Insert the C-clip retaining ring so that it goes into that groove. If needed, use pliers to seat the retaining ring. Connect the lateral push camera to the camera connector. Tighten the hex screws at the base of the camera to secure it to the camera connector. Turn on the mainline controller unit and camera power to check connections. If everything checks out, your cable is now ready for use. Be sure and check out our other instructional videos, and our support teams are always happy to assist you at 1-800-767-1974 or 1-859-499-0122.